What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen a talking snowman before?
Now, this won't hurt a bit.
Sort of one of the best attributes of stop motion is it can feel like toys brought to life. And I think that the RankinBass Christmas specials in particular gave you that feeling.
That style, the stop motion animation really was engaging. You know, it drew you in. I even find it really interesting now, but as a kid, it's really magical.
But there's also sort of this wonderful sense of a miniature world, as if you've been shrunken down and you're stepping into a world of toys, because they're tangible objects, unlike cell animation, which you can't really touch it. And the thing about Animagic is that you feel like you could just sort of reach out and grab a hold of the figures.
Part of it was the design of the characters, the big head, the tiny body, little fat fingers. I think the design was appealing, and so the movement accentuated that in a really charming way.
It is also probably because we always played with toys, right? So we were playing with things that looked like what we were watching on the screen. So it felt more immediate to me than, say, Ray Harryhausen, which felt like another world. You know, I wasn't playing with I wasn't playing with that in my yard. You know, I was playing with things that looked like a RankinBass special.
Well, hi there. Aren't you the sturdy little fellow? Ho, 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 ho.
Santa.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was definitely the breakthrough production for RankinBass Studios. It's what made them a household name. I mean, they weren't even originally called RankinBass. They were Videocraft International, but literally and figuratively, this kind of helped to make a name for them. It was their avenue into entertainment production. They had tried one TV series before this. It was called The New Adventures of Pinocchio. It was kind of appropriate to their Animagic animation process, which being stop-motion animation. It was kind of like a combination of puppetry and animation anyway, so perfect for Pinocchio. And they'd done a bunch of commercials, including for General Electric, which is how they got their foot in the door to produce Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as an episode of General Electric Theater on NBC in 1964. But yeah, this was definitely the beginning of the RankinBass dynasty.
Arthur and Jules divided up the duties, but they overlapped as well. That's why they said produced and directed, because Hanna-Barbera did that too. Their shows very often said produced and directed by, but then you'd see animation director, and where you saw them specifically listed as director, they may have taken on the helm of a project more than the other. Jules was a writer, and Jules oversaw the progress of work perhaps in a different way than Arthur did. Arthur was the artist, so he would oversee the design more. But the structure, the timing, that was Jules.
One of the secrets to their success wasn't artistic. It was them. It was Rankin and Bass. It was two guys who knew their way around the New York networks, commercial studios, the filmmaking community. They had business savvy. As producers, they could put a show together. They didn't have a studio with lots of animators and artists around. They were doing stop motion, they were doing hand-drawn, but they were farming that production out. And much of where they farmed it out was to Japan. When I teach my students at Cal Arts about stop motion, and I show some clips from Rudolph and Mad Monster Party, I tell them, you've been raised on Japanese animation, and you didn't even know it.
And there was no way for us to know where they were produced. In fact, I went to Rochester Institute of Technology, and I was studying animation. I was doing stop motion up there. And when I graduated, I went to Manhattan, where they, RankinBass had their office. I went over to the secretary and said, I'm here to see the guys and show them my work. And she looked at me and said, we don't do it here. It's all done in Japan. I was so disappointed. We were frustrated that from New York, we would never be able to fly to California to go to Disneyland, let alone go to Japan to work on an animated special.
It's all settled. We leave tomorrow together.
So when we got to meet Arthur, we did get him to describe a little bit of the process to us of how the ideas would originate in the RankinBass offices. They would, write the script and do design work and do storyboards and have a clear view of what they wanted to do. And then because he had met Tad Mochinaga and he knew his artistry of interpreting everything, they would send the designs over and they would start building the puppets for a few months before the shooting started.
When they found studios in Canada and in Japan that can produce animation cheaper but with very high quality, they understood how they could use that, how they could make their business grow using the best possible talent in the most economical way.
They hired artists with really distinct styles. If you look like Jack Davis, his style is implanted on some of those specials. It looks like his work. They didn't try to homogenize it. They didn't try to make it look like another company. They just went for that graphic style and they held to it. And I think that's what really sets them apart is they're not trying to be like anybody else. They're trying to be true to a specific artist.
And then you've got the Paul Coker look, which was a Christmas look.
Paul Coker was and is an amazing illustrator. His style is completely unique to him. Whatever influences Paul Coker had, I can't find them. He draws like Paul Coker. And he did that for years for greeting cards, and people bought those greeting cards like crazy. He had this weird ink-line style, which is absent from the special because the animators couldn't really replicate it. But you realize on the specials that even if you take that ink line away, the designs are still solid.
Happy birthday! Hey, I said my first words.
It's very different from the stuff that was going on elsewhere in animation. It's got a more of a comic strip sensibility. He was a comic artist, he was an illustrator, and it's got that illustrative look to it that is a little bit sillier, a little bit more playful, simpler, more graphic. And it also kind of leans on caricature as well, which delighted me when I was a kid.
Something that stood out to me recently watching it with my kids when I watched Frosty too long ago is that the lines are all colored. Frosty's got like blue lines. They didn't just do black line outlines for most of the characters. As an animator, I recognized that that was a lot more work that they layered onto it just to keep that level of design consistent throughout it, which was really impressive and to this day gives those specials a unique look and feel.
There's a unity in those shows. The songs work with the pictures work with the voices, the art style supports it all. There's a single-mindedness in them. In the Frosty special, Paul Coker Jr.'s designs are all throughout it. It doesn't look like some Hanna-Barbera show where this guy laid out this scene and this guy designed this scene. They have a unity and a coherence, and it looks like they made the show they set out to make.
The holiday specials are a world of their own, and I think it's just part of why they don't date, because it stood out. It was beautifully done, so it has to be well done, but it's beautifully done, and it was very unique.
We got to interview Arthur Rankin a few years ago, which was great. And I remember asking him about the 2D versus stop motion, how they would decide. And a lot of it seemed like it was simply just which medium is going to be best for this story. Sometimes I think there were also technical considerations where the stop motion studio cannot put out any more things right now. And so we'll scoot that over to the 2D side and we'll divide and conquer. Right. Arthur Rankin said they loved doing Frosty both ways, because they did have the 2D Frosty original special, and then they actually transferred that character into stop motion later, which is cool to see them doing two different mediums with the same character.
And you can see the anime influence sometimes in the 2D, like the part where Jessica is looking down into the well and she's singing goes into the whole 2D psychedelic kind of feel and stuff. You could see the anime influence in that. Definitely.
The Japanese animation style is very prevalent. And I actually really would like it when they would mix the 2D sequences into the stop motion films, because I just love anything that mixes mediums.
Why weren't you at elf practice?
Just fixing these dolls' teeth.
One of the hallmarks of RankinBass television, especially their specials, was the fact that they were almost, I would say 99% fat-free. There were hardly any wasted spaces in them. Everything seemed to be there for a reason. I asked Maury Laws once why the TV specials were so paced like a show, like a Broadway show or a classic film. And he said that was Jules. He would do the exposure sheets and figure out exactly what the timing was. He says, and then he would decide who the characters were, what they needed, and they would work closely together. And they became a songwriting team. They were the only songwriting team that were writing original scores for animated films from the mid-60s until the 80s, which is astonishing when you think about it, because Disney wasn't doing that. They had not put original scores in a musical sense since the 50s, and not until 1989 with The Little Mermaid. Rankin Bass did it over and over and over again. And you have to remember, with an original score, you're taking a big chance because no one's ever heard the song before. Now, maybe they've heard Frosty the Snowman, but when they're hearing 5 or 6 brand new songs, you've got to catch them right away. And it's risky. And yet, people walk away loving the Snow Miser song, or put one foot in front of the other. So it's a pretty bold move, and something that they really never got enough credit for as a songwriting team.
They're working in this very sort of solid tradition of musical theater, Broadway musicals, which had already come to television in the previous generation via the form of original musicals for television. Maury Laws was definitely, you know, a contender in that area. Those songs are memorable. And, you know, if he had wanted, I can't imagine that he couldn't have gotten a show on Broadway if he ever really tried. But I'm sure that the residuals from all the things he wrote for those Christmas specials were, you know, a much more lucrative pursuit.
Don't you know toys are against the law?
What?
Yep, it's true.
Well, gee, that's kind of a silly law.
If the Burgermeister saw you, we would all be in great danger.
In danger from toys?
The charm of the Rankin Bass shows, to me, a lot of that is Romeo Mueller. I think he was a very good writer. The one time I met him, I told him that, and I think he thought I was just being polite, but I really meant it, because he had to take these short songs or these short premises and make them fill out an hour or a half an hour and resolve satisfactory. I think the structure of the Rudolph special, of the Frosty special, of all the specials he wrote are very strong, because they actually have endings, even though they're based on things that, in the case of Frosty, ended with a very sad note. The character dies, basically. And Rudolph was a very short story, and somehow he turned it into an epic.
Romeo Mueller would take the songs and he would break them down into parts, in a way making them into an outline. And as a kid, I would love that. And I'm sure kids love that too. If they know the songs, they're actually seeing them being acted out, because characters at random, and it didn't matter who they were, would actually say, or through their actions or events, would show you what was happening. The reindeers would start calling him names, and then Rudolph says,
Stop calling me names!
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer!
So they didn't necessarily even have to say the lyric, and you knew it was happening. Or Jessica would say to Chris, you know if they've been bad or good? And then Chris says,
So you tell him to be good, for goodness sake.
The lyrics are an integral part of the script. Through the show, you're hearing the song, but you never really hear the whole song until the end. You just get little teases of it, making you wait. That was another thing. They made you wait all through the special to see what happened and to tie it all together. What Romeo Mueller also brought was original characters and locations. So in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the song, there's no Island of Misfit Toys, there's no King Moonracer, there's no Little Dolly for Sue that we don't quite know what her problem is, there's no Cowboy that rides the ostrich, or Clarice who sings There's Always Tomorrow. There's none of that. That's all the invention of Romeo Mueller. And he had this capacity for creating interesting, wonderful characters. Same thing with Santa Claus Is Coming to Town. You had Topper, the little lost penguin. You had Jessica, probably the first time that Mrs. Claus was depicted as a young woman. And you had Professor Hinkle, the lousy magician, played by Billy DeWolf in Frosty the Snowman, who was a classic Rankin Bass villain who was a bad guy but was inept. He was bad, and he pretty much tried to kill Frosty, but he was also kind of a moron.
Now you go home and write, I am very sorry for what I did to Frosty 100 zillion times. And then maybe, just maybe, mind you, you'll find something in your stocking tomorrow morning.
certainly from a script point of view, they are very freewheeling. They're kind of mad in a way. I mean, some of the narrative shifts and plot devices in those shorts are nuts. I mean, there's some weird stuff going on in some of them. And I think that's kind of cool in itself, because I think just a little bit more like a dream. And, of course, importantly, the stories that they're telling are already tapping into this rich vein of folklore and traditional holiday stories that you are already in love with those characters.
It's nice that the shows go through different emotional levels. I mean, in the Frosty show, here's poor Romeo Mueller, who has to take this 2-minute song that, you could make the entire song in about a 1.5-minute video and get everything that's in the song. But he adds stories and he adds suspenseful moments. The scene where Frosty is carrying Karen through the snow and she may not make it is a pretty frightening story. Her life is in the hands of this weird creature that came out of nowhere because of a magic hat. And it's Jackie Vernon's voice, and he doesn't sound like the swiftest guy in the world. He's our hero, but he's not that bright and he's not that deep. He's a snowman. How would you like your life to depend on a snowman?
I really am a mean and despicable creature at heart, you know. It's so difficult to really change.
Arthur and Jules did not ever or rarely had a villain die a death. He usually had the villain reform. They usually would turn nice before the end of the show, or if they didn't turn nice, they would go away in some other way. In the case of Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, they just said the Meisterburgers died off and fell out of power. So just time went by and families move on. So it wasn't like he fell off a cliff. They didn't want to encourage violence. There was hardly any slapstick even. They were very ahead of their time.
Now, calm down. Calm down. I reformed this bumble. He wants a job. Looky what he can do.
Those of us who write cartoons frequently spend long nights balancing the needs of the merchandising and the network notes and the studio's desires with the necessity to write a story that works for us. The songs like Rudolph and Frosty resonated when Gene Autry sang them because they were very simple, self-contained songs, and they were valid, and they told cute little stories to the extent that a 3-minute song can tell a story. And the RankinBass folks managed to expand upon those and keep the integrity of the song. They could have done lousy stories from them. They didn't. There were many ways they could have done a Frosty the Snowman storyline extracted from that song. They picked a good way to do it. I can imagine 15 ways that wouldn't have worked and wouldn't have had that satisfaction at the end. The point is that the song ends with Frosty melting away, and then we have that visual in the special where Karen is on her knees crying over a big puddle that used to be her friend. And then along comes Santa Claus, and he says, no, he's coming back next year. But actually, the mythology is very nice at the end because Santa Claus is eternal. He goes away. He comes back because he's Santa Claus, and he's essentially saying at the end, I'm bringing Frosty with me every year, one way or another. That's why the end of the show works well. It takes the sadness of the song without denying it and builds upon it and lets you see it as something positive.
Doggone thing always conks out when you... Well, hello there. My name's Special Delivery Klugel, SD for short. Oh, I've got lots of letters for Santa today.
People don't realize now, because we're so used to animation with star voices, it was rare in those days. RankinBass got big stars for animation. They didn't do cartoons in those days.
They usually would use one big name, and this started with Rudolph, where they had Burl Ives being your narrator, and he would be like your host, and that was a formula that they adopted going forward.
If you watch the beginning of Santa Claus Is Coming to Town, you'll see Fred Astaire dance moves. Time was taken to at least provide the animators with an idea, sketches, photographs, maybe footage, so that they could give you a little taste in animation.
RankinBass loved it too. This was a way of giving them real star power.
The stars trusted them. They knew that they were going to have songs that were written in their keys. that they could sing well and sound good. And they knew, because they talked to each other, that the RankinBass people would treat them well, would be prepared. They knew they were dealing with pros.
I think the value of having a Burl Ives or a Jimmy Durante in a special made the show feel a little more important when it first aired. Then once you got past the first airing or two, it was, oh, let's go watch that show I loved so much last year. Or introducing to your kids, oh, kids, you're gonna love this. I watched this when I was a kid, and I loved it. You don't need Jimmy Durante or Burl Ives anymore, although it's nice still that they're there. They're not selling tools anymore. The history of the show and the acclaim that it's received is the selling point.
Well, now let me tell you about Rudolph. It all started a couple of years before the big snow.
Back in the 1960s, the population was around 170 million people, which is about half of what it is today. When Rudolph came on in 1964, there were only 3 networks. So whoever got on television in those days was a big hit, live or animated. But this was an animated special that got, a tremendous share of audience because, again, there were only 3 networks and it was a famous song. And that was, of course, the forerunner for many animated specials.
Now you have to understand, there were no Christmas specials back in the early 60s when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. Yeah, we had maybe the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol came on, but Mr. Magoo was a well-known character. This was like a little special episode of Mr. Magoo. Here was this special primetime stop-motion spectacular.
Back in the 60s, when you had one television, you'd watch it in the living room with the whole family.
Yeah, and it was the holidays, so it was really kind of cool. And what was really great about their stuff was they were toys moving magically on a set. So it really embodied everything about Christmas.
We now know it's a classic, but we didn't know when it first went on it was going to be a classic, and we didn't even know when it was going on that the songs were going to be memorable, that the animation was cute and charming, and you almost wanted to go out and buy those toys. I don't even know if they sold those characters back then. They didn't think like that back then. Burl Ives was the star. Of course, he was well-known as a folk singer. And these were really, really instantly classic Christmas songs that they introduced on this show.
All right, son, try it on.
I don't wanna. Daddy, I don't like it.
You'll like it and wear it.
Oh, but Daddy, it's not very comfortable.
There are more important things than comfort.
The story of Rudolph is a very classic kind of story. It's, the fish out of water, the underdog, and it was appealing to children and adults alike.
Real classic family entertainment speaks to everyone. It speaks to your grandma, and it speaks to your youngest child. And watching it together as a family is really the joy of those pieces.
If something was on TV and you were a kid, you were going to watch it. There was Saturday morning cartoons. There were some cartoons after school. And then, of course, holiday time, you'd have the Christmas specials. And those Christmas specials would be on every year. And it became a perennial ritual to watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
It's 1964. That's pretty cool, because that's when we started animating. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I was 10, you were 12, and actually the very first thing we wanted to animate, we had these we created snow sets.
Christmas elves.
Christmas elves and a little devil, and we had a story with an ice castle. These are little miniatures we built down in the basement. And it all came from Rankin and Bass's Rudolph special.
When I was younger, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was a song. Everybody knew it. We sang it in school. Frosty the Snowman was a song. That's how we knew of these characters. Their legend was passed down through generations in song. RankinBass may not have realized it, but they're passing along these same songs and the legends of these characters through the visual medium, through animation.
Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?
It will be an honor, sir.
One of the things that distinguishes this special as the first in RankinBass's classic run is that the songs were actually contributed. All of them, not just the one on which the special is based, but the others that were added for the sake of the special, were composed by the original composer, Johnny Marks. He produced a few other songs for the special, We Are Santa's Elves and Silver and Gold. Silver and Gold being the one that I think had the most success outside the context of the special. It's the one that's sort of wormed its way into the cultural songbook.
Nothing.
I think what made Rudolph such an instant success was that you'd never seen anything like it on television. It felt so special and so original.
Just in terms of something different, it was all the combination of story, lighting, a beauty to it that was exceptional.
It clearly didn't have the time that like the Harryhausen stop motion did. I think it was done on 2 frames, so there was a little bit of a jitteriness to it. In other words, you move the puppet, you shoot 2 frames, which is 2/25ths of a second, so a 1/12th of a second, then you do the next pose. But it's not as smooth, because even though it's so quick, you actually see a little bit of a stutter. But it was part of that signature look that I remember from growing up and really loving.
Those Rankin Bass guys, the animators were just brave as can be, and they would make a puppet jump, spin around, defy gravity.
I love those shots because it's very clear that they're using monofilament rigs to hold the characters up. And in modern day, we would just use metal jointed rigs to hold things up, and then you paint them out with the computer later. But back then, they didn't have the ability to do that, so they would have to cleverly hold things up using tungsten wire or fishing wire. I love those Fred Astaire dancing shots because he'll go up, he'll hit a pose, and he'll just stay there for 18 frames, and then he'll defy gravity. It's just not realistic movement in the least, but it's perfect in terms of this dreamlike world that's being created.
They were limited in what they can do, because nowadays, you have all sorts of digital technology to like convey like the most subtlest of emotions. I feel like all sorts of subtle emotions come out of those puppets as well. You know when Rudolph is upset, when Santa's all cranky because he doesn't want to like waste his time listening to these elves sing the song. Like, you don't feel like you're missing like the subtleness of anything because it's all still there.
Well, it needs work. I have to go.
So even in the kind of clunky way that they were animating, there was a charm to it that it just fit the whole design style and the story. That's Animagic.
It's the simplicity that makes the story shine through and the characters shine through. I think there aren't a lot of really fancy camera moves. It's all pretty proscenium staged and simple theatrical puppeteering tricks up the sleeve, but it's still very effectual.
What I love about Rankin Bass, and it's something that I keep going back to, is that it was joyful, it was bright and vibrant and happy, and was a world that you wanted to be in, you wanted to play in.
They wrote the script in the US, they recorded it in Canada, they used some great voice people, they had a great track for the animators to follow, and I believe the animators, even though they had already worked on Pinocchio, really wanted to prove themselves with this special, and they did.
I do think because they were animated in Japan, there is a different sensibility that comes to it. Even if you just look at the lip sync, they're just working off an X sheet. They don't know what the characters are truly saying. They don't understand it as we understand it. I think there are a couple of animators who truly got it, because I'll tell you, for the most part, Sam is right on. His lip sync looks really great.
I love this Christmassy time of year. Especially when everything is running happy and smooth like it is this season. Nothing like that year of the big snowstorms.
And there's a lot of imperfections in it too. If you look at it, you can see the little supports and you can see how it's done. So it really feels handmade, and a lot of stuff now is really slick. And you don't have the what Japanese call wabi-sabi. It's those handmade imperfections, that human touch, that give it personality.
When Rudolph's nose is red and it glows, I mean, we all know it's a little bit of a light bulb that they stuck in there, but it just charms the pants off of us. We just love it.
Even though they were animated in Japan, it feels like an American-made work. And I don't know if that has to do with the designs, the voices, even though the voices they're all Canadians, right? So you're talking about all these people from different places all coming together to make something that feels wholly American to me. There isn't a lot of overacting. There's not a lot of big gesturing and, grand performance.
I don't know why it always fascinated me the way Burl Ives' snowman, when he first comes out and he's creating that trail in the snow as he zigzags his way up to the camera. I can tell as a kid, I inherently know that that's a physical thing that's happening. And it's kind of magical to watch him part through the snow like that. It's just little weird touches like that make that
the medium just feels so different from anything else.
The performances were appealing. I mean, so much is part of the design of those characters, but also the simplicity in how they're moved. There was a precision in there, and obviously, an animator has to be a pretty darn good actor to get that across, and that's to me what's so magical about being an animator, is that you've got to have the ability to be a craftsman and make these move, but also have the talent of an actor to express it through these characters. And I thought they did an amazing job.
You don't feel the heavy technical weight of the production of stop motion animation when you're watching them. It's like you feel this breezy, light storytelling style, and that's not easy to achieve. And it's just nice and unpretentious and straightforward.
And there's a sincerity to it as well. Like, you can tell that everybody that worked on those things fell in love with the projects, because, whether it was at first they wanted just a job or whatever, but they eventually just realized that this is something really cool that you don't get to see every day, especially back then in the 60s.
You can tell when something has been really cared about, and you can feel the enthusiasm of someone's work in the film, absolutely. Right. It's just exuding that energy and that charm.
Limitations are good for every artist, I think. And I think there are quite a few limitations that were put in front of the artists who made these specials. 44 minutes, right? So you have to tell a story in a very compacted amount of time. You're handed a song, which already has a plot. You grow from there, right? And you grow the cast of characters, keeping in mind that none of their stories can be so big that we exceed the amount of time we have. You also are talking about a visual medium at the time, which is small, right? It's not like going to see a movie that has some grand scope. It's actually like you have to understand it sitting across the room. So there's a simplicity that has to be delivered. And it also means that the dialogue has to carry a certain amount of the information. And I think all those limitations came together with Rudolph in a brilliant way. It's unbelievable that they were able to create such depth and such humanity with all those constraints. It seems impossible, really.
I think RankinBass really captured something using the classic storytelling format. Rudolph is that fish out of water, that underdog. It's almost the story of Moses. It's almost the story of Hamlet.
Clarice?
Papa!
You get back to your cave this instant.
But
This instant, young lady.
Yes, sir.
Now, there's one thing I want to make very plain. No doe of mine is going to be seen with a red-nosed reindeer.
Even though they're based on simple songs and they're very basic stories, they do really encapsulate the hero's journey and the mythic aspects of storytelling.
This is the only clue, sir. It says claws.
Oh, take the little baggage to the orphan asylum. That's the proper place for foundlings anyway.
And it might sound weird to apply that, that whole Joseph Campbell Jungian archetype form to something as simple as an old stop-motion Christmas special. But if you look at it, it really does follow the hero's journey. And I think that there's something about audiences that we love to see those stories told. There's something baked in us that makes us really enjoy watching a character like Rudolph come of age and prevail, especially after being an outcast in the beginning. And I think everybody could relate to what that feels like.
Rudolph, I promise, as soon as this storm lets up, I'll find homes for all those misfit toys.
It's not a coincidence that so many popular stories and movies for kids tell that story. They tell the story of the underdog, because I think that is something that every kid can recognize and can understand.
I'll never fit in.
The idea of a kid being bullied, or a kid not fitting in, or not knowing how he fits in, that's universal.
As a child, I wasn't into sports. I was an artist, so I was made fun of all the time, and I was picked on constantly. So a program like Rudolph made me feel like there was hope, that I could find my special talent, that I could become something. Or not that I would become it, that it was in me, right? And I just had to take advantage of who I was and understand who I was in a deeper way.
I don't know if there's any other cartoon special that you felt so much empathy for the main character. It's amazing that, these are just wooden puppets, bit of cloth, and yet you feel so much for them when those stories are happening.
And I think regardless of the medium, you're just always shooting to kind of hit that level of empathy. That's what you want to achieve as a storyteller.
Well, let's be on our way. Ready, Rudolph?
Ready, Santa?
Okay, Rudolph. Full power.
The Rudolph special really put them on the map. It was instantly successful. It got a monster rating, and they instantly knew that they were going to run that year after year after year. I think the Norelco people may have come in and said, we want to put that on for the next 3 years or something of the sort. That's the success story you're trying to emulate. Television abounds in that. Television is all about network executives sitting there looking at a show, preferably one of their own, saying, we want another one of those. And RankinBass were the people who could deliver that.
Once Rudolph came on, it was a huge hit. Obviously, sponsors are going to start thinking about maybe finding their own animated special. It looked like a good thing for television, obviously.
So everything that they did set the template for pretty much everything that came after it. I mean, even if you look at Chuck Jones' design for Grinch, it harkens back to what RankinBass did. Everything about RankinBass specials, in some ways, were about Christmas traditions.
A recurring theme to me seems to be, well, love and acceptance. Sometimes expressed through acts of generosity, i.e. gift giving, sometimes expressed through miracles, bright miracles, that are either bespeak or are metaphorical for things like love and acceptance, because that, I think, is the central underlying theme of the Christmas holiday in general. So a lot of the RankinBass specials, obviously Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, first of all, is kind of about the reintegration of like these underdog, misfit characters who have yet to find their place in an unforgiving society, suddenly having some epiphany that allows them to do so specifically at Christmas time, and in Rudolph's case, directly through Christmas time, because he is able, through his so-called deformity of his red glowing nose is what allows Santa Claus to come through and make his deliveries and allow the Christmas holiday to happen as planned in the end. And along the way, Rudolph is actually able to extend this theme to a few other supporting characters as well. Hermie the elf, the misfit elf dentist, finally gets to open his dental practice at the North Pole. Yukon Cornelius finally strikes treasure of a sort, not silver and gold necessarily, but friendship. Even the Bumble Snow Monster gets to join the extended family of Santa Claus and his little North Pole society. And of course, we can't forget those ever-popular misfit toys from the island of misfit toys, which as a kid were my favorite part of the special, to be honest. I loved that musical number, and I dearly wanted a water pistol that shoots jelly.
There's something about Christmas spirit, too, the idea of Christmas time when those magical synchronicities happen, and we accept that level of magic in those stories. It's a magic time. So when you tell a movie that's set during Christmas, you get this extra little feeling that overlays the story. And that's why so many movies are set during that time. Whether it's, Die Hard or Home Alone or Rudolph or Frosty, there's a sense that there's a different set of rules for something set at Christmas time that our culture accepts and looks for. That's part of the formula, is you want a little bit of the magical hand of fate, some higher divine force that's helping guide you through. And the stories tend to be inspirational and life-affirming and hopeful, capturing the essence of what that holiday really represents, both in religions and in cultures. I loved that feeling as a kid, and I love it as an adult. I love it as a parent. And that's the through line to all of these Christmas shows and Christmas specials that are on TV every year, is when you watch it, not only do you enjoy it because it's interesting or cool or brings back memories, but it makes you feel something. It makes you feel how you want to feel, especially at Christmas time.
Oh, please. Let me have just a little magic.
The very first Christmas trees.
I think these specials imprint on our souls as artists when we're young. It's hard to separate yourself from them.
I guess one of the influences that Rudolph had was on future animation, because when they interview a lot of the directors from DreamWorks or Pixar, they all refer back to the music of Rudolph and the importance of song and so forth. Of course, Disney created that way back with Snow White and Pinocchio.
If you look at my films, every single one of them is about a misfit, trying to find their way in the world, right? In a world that's different than they are, that doesn't understand who they are. So I can't really escape it. It was planted when I was little, and it just keeps on, picking at me.
There's things in Nightmare that those are easy to name. The idea that they're fogged in and Sally's trying to stop them from going on their mission, and Zero comes to the rescue. That's totally taken, from Rudolph and his tale. Oogie Boogie and his influence from, Villains and Monsters from Rankin and Bass. There's lots of connections.
Elf was a project that was very much inspired by Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in particular.
It was very important for John to have this sequence in the beginning, the North Pole sequence, that kind of locked us into the fantasy of Christmas. And for him, Christmas was Rankin and Bass.
And Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer specifically.
And part of what's fun about Elf, I think, is it looks like it might have been made not too much after Rudolph, because we used all the same technologies and techniques, and we really held back, especially in that North Pole sequence, from using techniques that wouldn't have been available back at the time that Rankin Bass was doing its shows.
CG is a great tool. It does a lot of great things. No matter how real it looks, it's always fake. But no matter how fake stop motion looks, it's always real. And people kind of tap into the physical, textural quality of knowing that this is a real object that's moving magically on the screen.
And I remember even as we went down the road and made certain decisions, like, this is how they did it, but I think it looks, we may want to do this because it's a newer movie. And like, for example, they were going to animate on every frame to make it smoother. And I was like, nope, we got to do it on 2s. At first they cringed a little bit because it makes your work not look as elegant. And it looks like you're doing it because you want to save time or money. But in our case, we did it because we wanted to make it look authentic and really remind you. And I don't know that people know that that's the way that animation was done back then, but when you see it, you feel it. That was what we contended, that if we do it, if we really pay attention to detail, people might not know, but they'll feel it.
Would you tell Santa about our homeless toys? I'm sure he could find little boys and girls who would be happy with them. A toy is never truly happy until it is loved by a child.
The only chance you've got at making something special and timeless that will last is to take chances, is to not just polish what everyone already knows. It's to look under a different rock, bring in something new. These holidays in the Rankin Bass specials were from outer space, but they worked. They gave the plots interest and soul. There was an empathy created. So you can't just take the classic story and spend more money on it and do it the same way. You've really got to find another angle, invent new mythology to join with something people know, which is what Nightmare Before Christmas is about. It's like something people know and then something brand new. And how well you can blend those, I think, will have a lot to do with how long your film will keep people's interest.
It's funny how all the animated specials have become an annual part of the Christmas scene. And all the music, all you hear is Rudolph and Frosty and Christmas Time is Here. It's just amazing. After 50 years, they're still with us. I think it's because Charles Schulz once said that this country, there would always be a market for innocence. And I think that's true today. We have a little more difficult time today than we did 50 years ago, but there's still a market for a whole family to go enjoy, whether it's a movie or a television special or whatever. But we had no idea, I'm sure, any of us, that they were going to still be here, these shows 50 years later.
Rudolph has never been off. It's on every year. It's the longest running special in history. It is almost a rite of passage that you have to watch it. You have to share it with your kids. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. It's something that we all still share, and there's very little that's broadcast that we all still share. That's annual and that everybody looks forward to.
It's about families getting together. You can sit back, relax, and watch these little puppet films on TV. That's important.
Rankin and Bass are really in touch with childhood, that they were able to always sort of step in and touch the heart of a child. And I would say it's even true that they can touch the heart of the child in every adult, because I still feel moved by them when I watch them. I can only guess that it came from those two men working with the groups that they chose to work with and guiding them towards doing something that was sensitive, right? That didn't shy away, that wasn't cynical.
Arthur Rankin and Jules Bass cemented They're standing in animation history across the board, whether it's 2D or stop motion. They're the ones that pioneered the Christmas special, where they were able to like take this old art form and be able to present it to a wide audience and be appreciated and stand to this day. And I am really happy to finally see that they're getting the respect that they deserve, because what people weren't recognizing was the artistry behind what Arthur and Jules did. And they have as much of a high status in animation history, as much as Walt Disney, as much as Rishi Trinka, as much as Starovich, or anybody else.
RankinBass has entered our culture surely as Warner Brothers cartoons, as Disney cartoons, as Hanna-Barbera cartoons. They are part of the pervasive culture in America. These specials are evergreen. They're timeless.
Rudolph, Christmas is not off, and you're going to lead my team.
I am?
Yes, sir. You and that wonderful nose of yours.
Joy is implanted on the moments you spend watching these films. I find myself thinking, how do I make something like that that will attach to a new generation of kids and will live in them for the rest of their lives? And it's because the RankinBass specials did that to me.